Yo, yo, it is May 26th. It's the PFF Forecast. It's a Tuesday. Kind of feels like a Monday. Those are the best Mondays, I guess. Although I'm not going to lie, I felt a little stressed out that we didn't have a regular Monday. But nonetheless, we are making it happen. We're going to talk a little bit about the two quarterbacks that played this weekend on the golf course. We'll talk about the match. We're going to do that at the end, though. And what we're going to do is do a little preview of the AFC East. We're going to look at what happened last year, talk about what to expect this year. So should be a lot of fun. Let's rock. Eric, I have a confession for you before we get started.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So let me tell you my meals in order from this weekend.
Okay.
I think this is I would call it a trifecta, but there's four. So I think this might be the most American thing I've ever done. So I had pizza, I had a double cheeseburger, I had brisket, and then I had ribs in consecutive days.
Wow.
Yeah. Proud of me?
I'm proud of you, man. I feel like I had a more George Chahrouri weekend than you did.
Yeah, well, it's not hard given what I ate, but yeah, it honestly I felt I felt a little lethargic last night. It was hard not to, but I will say this: I hadn't had pizza in a really long time. Pizza's really good. So there we go. We're off to a hot start. I also just spilled my water everywhere, so now I'm also soaking wet. So this is great. We're off to a good start here.
I was doing so. My family is currently at our family farm, and I'm in Cincinnati doing some work before the summer really gets started. So I did the thing where you go into a house and you've accumulated food for months,
right?
And everybody has destinations on eating these things, and they never get eaten. So I've spent the last 3 days just eating all the food in the house that no one wanted. So I think I had a better food weekend than you because no one wants the healthy food.
To bring this back to football, you are the Patriots scavenging the value free agents.
Correct.
Trading back in the first round, out of the first round, and you're going to reap the rewards. I am the New Orleans Saints in the draft. I've traded up with everything. I have not a whole lot to show for it besides a few extra pounds. And I paid for a couple of $20 million pass rushers because it's going to get me. It made me feel good in the moment. And with that, we're off. Let's do we'll do the match at the end because I'm excited to hear what you thought of that. I think we both bet on it. I think we're both a little sad by what happened, but nonetheless, learning experience. So we'll start with the AFC East, and I wanted to ask you this because I was trying to figure it out myself and I couldn't. What was the most surprising thing about the AFC East for you last year?
Oh, I think it's easy. I think that the Jets winning 7 games is by far the most surprising thing of the entire year. If you look at they should have won week 1 against Buffalo. If they don't have a rookie kicker who can't hit the broadside of a barn, they win that game. Then they go 3 or 4 games with Luke Falk, right? Then you have that Monday night game where Sam Darnold's seeing ghosts, and somehow they finish 7-9. To me, that is the most surprising thing. Obviously, people will point to Buffalo, but Buffalo made the playoffs 2 years ago. And, the Patriots were the Patriots, and I think everybody expected the Dolphins to do worse than they did. But to me, it's the Jets. And the Jets being a top 5 defensive team, but also getting 7 wins despite Sam Darnold not playing particularly well and not playing for part of the year was it for me.
Okay. I was legitimately surprised by this looking over the notes that we have for this division. I had to read this 3 times. Who was the most valuable quarterback in the AFC East last year?
Oh, Ryan Fitzpatrick.
I'm still having trouble like reading that.
So it adds up though, right? Because
it does. Now I went through. So the only reason I got to this point was I went through. By the way, I have the windows open because it's like 100 degrees here, and you can hear church bells. I'm sure in the background. You're welcome. I don't know who's ringing them though, because essential workers only. I went through multiple stages here. So first, I said, the most surprising thing about this division last year was the Bills and how good they were. But then, honestly, looking back, like the Bills are a very strong roster, and that ultimately, they won 10 games. That was more than you'd expect, but not that surprising. Like I think you could have seen it coming. The Jets obviously going 7-9 was surprising, but that was mostly after Sam Darnold got mono, right? Like that obviously hurts. The Patriots went 12-4, and it felt like they went 7-9 because of how everything ended. And that to me was surprising that they ended up with 12 wins, but felt that poorly. But then I came to the Dolphins and I go, what was really surprising with the Dolphins? They were being put below like 3 SEC teams on people's power rankings after week 5.
Right.
And ultimately in week 17, we're a pretty like competitive football team, right? I mean, they beat the Patriots, and
on the road.
To me, the Dolphins were one of the more surprising teams. And I looked at this and I go, well, no shit, they were. Ryan Fitzpatrick was the most valuable QB in the AFC East. I saying that I almost can't get it out.
Yeah, and that was despite a roster. I mean, we were on. I can't remember what the actual spread, but we were on Miami plus 14.5 maybe on that Monday night game against Mason Rudolph and the Steelers.
Can we just say that you could just call last season like Miami plus 14.5 and that would sum it up for me?
Yeah, because it's funny because we were on them plus 16 I think against the Chargers, and they didn't cover that.
Right.
We were on, and we wrote that one up, and then we were on them plus 14.5 on Monday Night Football. They get a 14-0 lead, and then they legitimately try to tank the second part. Like Fitzpatrick in 2 games that we had the Dolphins in double-digit underdogs. Fitzpatrick was fumbled the ball, and the ball's laying there for the other team to return. Remember the Micah Hyde return onside kick against the Bills? They flirted with not covering, double-digit multiple touchdown spreads for the first half of the year. And then in the second half of the year, I mean, they had that really great thriller against the Bengals, which is one of the best games of the season. No one watched. They went ahead and beat, they did my Kansas City Chiefs a favor and beat New England in week 17. They beat Philadelphia, right? They came back from 2 touchdowns down to beat Philadelphia, a playoff team in the second half of the year. They were interesting, right? And then they beat the Jets. Their first win was against the Jets, a team that ended up finishing 7-9. They win over their 4.5 season win total, and almost all of it, if you look at 3-13 team to 5-11, almost all of it was the 2 wins above replacement that Ryan Fitzpatrick got them in his 13 starts.
Yeah, so I want to come back to the Bills and the Patriots in a second, but to close out this Dolphins talk, there's more looking ahead. There is a lot to be excited about if you're the Dolphins. So Devontae Parker, we talked about Ryan Fitzpatrick, obviously. Devontae Parker was the most valuable non-quarterback in the AFC East. There are a lot of things. You then bring in Tua. I'll make this claim, and people will get really angry at me in Buffalo and in New York, but the Dolphins have a strong case for having the 2 best quarterbacks.
Right. The best quarterback situation, I think, is pretty clear.
Certainly. And then you look at their draft, and the reason that maybe we're not as excited is because Austin Jackson and Noah Igbenogany are kind of projects. However, every first rounder is a project, and you should not put way too much stock in how a team drafts looking ahead this year. So I look at the free agents additions, Byron Jones and Kyle Van Noy, Shaq Lawson. You bring in Curtis Weaver late in the draft, who's a guy that can probably start rushing the passer immediately. There is a pathway by which the Dolphins, who are plus 800 to win this division, an implied probability about 11%, come away with a division title. I think that might be my favorite of the long shot bets.
Malcolm Perry, the Navy quarterback, who's a good runner. This is to me the funniest thing. So the Dolphins' leading rusher last year was Ryan Fitzpatrick with 243 yards. I have to look back. That's got to be like one of the lowest leading rusher totals in the history. They had one running back go over 200 yards rushing last year, and it was Mark Walton at 201. They're obviously to the degree of like, we like Flores, and we like, how he's constructing this defense, but it also is pretty cool that they like did not try to establish the run last year, right? They just they said, if we're going to win football games, it's going to be because Ryan Fitzpatrick drops back to throw and he plays pretty well. And as we've said a number of times on
you have a hard time running the ball when you're down 21 to start the game.
Sure. But they weren't down 21 to start the game in the second half of the season, and it still didn't they were running out Patrick Laird. And to me, it's like, okay, when you look at this, the probability that the Dolphins have at least a good quarterback is so much higher now that they have Tua and Fitzpatrick in the fold, because you can just sort of interchange them, right? And, I think that's really like, when you look at this division, there's a lot of concern about whether their defensive players will assimilate quick enough with the pandemic, but on offense, I think that they'll be more than good enough. Albert Wilson's a pretty good player. Gesicki turned into a really, a solid player in the second half of the season, one of the most valuable players. Jakeem Grant's a pretty good, like, all-around return man, runner of the football. And then you put a guy like Malcolm Perry in there, as kind of like a rich man's Taysom Hill, frankly. And you have, I think the makings of a halfway decent offense.
Why the Taysom Hill hatred? I mean,
because Malcolm Perry's good.
He's cheaper too.
Cheaper.
Here's the interesting thing about Fitzpatrick. His PFF grade from a clean pocket was 5th in the NFL. The issue was that they really struggled to pass protect. His average time to throw was below league average, about 2.6. His pressure rate was near 40%. So, I mean, obviously Tua in that situation, you almost like cringe hearing that. But if they can patch some things together, what you said is totally correct, right? The best QB situation, that goes a long way. And then I think it's worth now talking about how much better does Stefon Diggs make the Buffalo Bills, because the Patriots obviously get worse, probably way worse, right? Brady was 1.97 wins above replacement last year in one of his worst seasons that he's had, and you can't imagine Jared Stidham does that much better. But like, here was how I was kind of trying to wrap my head around this, because the Bills and the Patriots they basically have the same odds on betonline.ag to win. Which one of these teams has the highest floor? And like, isn't it the Patriots still? No.
See, here's my thing. So, and I wrote about this for the site. I think it'll go up like Wednesday, tomorrow or something. The Patriots had a bunch of whammies this offseason. They lose Tom Brady. They lose Jamie Collins. They lose Kyle Van Noy. They lose Danny Sheldon. They lose Duron Harmon. They lose Dante Scarnecchia, who is the only offensive line coach who's overseeing offensive lines worth a win above replay. Like, his average offensive line is worth a third of a win more than any other line coach in our database. And like, most of the time that guy doesn't matter, but he's like the one outlier among all of them. And so I think when you look at that offense a season ago, I'm going to give Brady more credit than maybe some people. Like, Mohamed Sanu was a replacement level player after he'd joined. Obviously, like, N'Keal Harry wasn't good. They didn't have a tight end to speak of. They still don't really have a tight end to speak of. Edelman was fine, but you put Brady and Scarnecchia probably covered up a lot of sins along that offensive line. And so you put Stidham in there, and I don't think it's going to be only the fact that Stidham is probably not nearly as accurate. He doesn't process as well, he doesn't have the arm strength, all that kind of stuff. It's going to be like the offense is going to crumble around him because he probably doesn't even protect his offensive line nearly as well as Brady did. Like, how does that team move the football, George? I don't know. Like,
here's what I was thinking about.
Wins.
I was trying to think about this too. I was like, if you always figure that Bill Belichick knows something that you don't. And last year, what he knew that, well, maybe we didn't quite fully understand was how great his defense was going to be.
Yeah.
And maybe he overlooked, the offensive side of the ball. And I'm trying to figure out what the thing is that we are overlooking that he knows it has to be on the offensive side of the ball, because was Julian Edelman so banged up last year that it totally destroyed their whole offensive system. And all Jared Stidham has to do is be a breathing human quarterback in order to take advantage of the fact that Edelman will now be at full strength, or N'Keal Harry was actually playing on a broken ankle with a thumb that needed amputating or something. I have no idea, because you can't look at how bad the offense was last year with Tom Brady and go, yeah, we're still going to be competitive subbing Jared Stidham in for Tom Brady, unless you know something that we don't. So maybe they know something about Jared Stidham that we don't. I've heard people talk about how Jared Stidham never really got a chance to show what he was all about in college because of the whole transfer thing. And, when he came to Auburn, he only had a small time to actually get acclimated. He probably never really got acclimated. I'm not overlooking those, trying to look into those more than I need to. But is there something, if there's one thing that Bill Belichick knows that we don't, what do you think it is?
Here's the thing. I agree wholeheartedly. I think I'm the biggest supporter of Belichick, which is why I'm not betting my life savings on under 9.5 wins right now for that team. But we've done this song and dance before. We said, okay, well, what was Belichick thinking when he drafted Sony Michel, right? And it was just kind of a mistake, right? There was no underlying reasoning to it. Everybody's going to point to the 2008 Patriots, when Castle took over for Brady after he was hurt. But I can assure you that's a different situation. That team had Wes Welker, 111 catches, right? They had Randy Moss, 69 catches, 11 touchdowns. Their third receiver, Jabbar Gaffney, would have been better, is probably better than any receiver aside from Julian Edelman on this current team. And they had Ben Watson, who Ben Watson was on the team last year that stunk on offense. And then offensive line was a lot better. To me, I look at this and I'm it looks like a tank situation. And it looks like they're just trying to, have a brave face right now. But they don't have any cap space. They have $750,000 in cap space. They don't have a good offensive line or any playmakers. And yeah, their defense is good, but a lot of those ancillary pieces are going to be rookies of the Kyle Duggar and the Josh Uche type. And their schedule is a lot harder than it was last year. We saw once the schedule ticked up, once they had Houston, once they had Baltimore, once they had Kansas City, and then eventually once they had the Dolphins, they couldn't win. I don't know, man. I don't think you could pay me enough to bet the over on New England, as good as Belichick is, and as good at as much as I respect him. I just don't see it this year.
No, I'm right there with you. And if I'm looking at, I had to check these twice, looking at the odds to win the division. So Buffalo's plus 125, they're the favorite. The New England Patriots plus 130. So about 44% chance implied probability of the Bills winning, 43 for the Patriots. And that just feels, when you say 43% chance the Patriots win and you look at that offense, man, are you serious? It's so hard for me to see that. And I know, and that's giving Bill Belichick a ton of credit. Bill Belichick he wasn't a bad coach last year. They lost with Tom Brady to the Miami Dolphins in a game they had to win. They lost at home in the playoffs to Ryan Tannehill. And I know Ryan Tannehill was good last year, but those things, it wasn't he wasn't trying to coach in those games. And I just can't understand how Jared Stidham can come in and be better than Tom Brady right off the bat. It just doesn't.
And there's a really good chance he has to be better than Brady was a season ago, because the schedule.
Everything else is worse or harder, right?
The schedule is tougher. There's no way that they get the kind of turnover variance that they got last season. The rest of the division, I think, is more stout. You're not going to get – last season they got the Dolphins, I believe, it was a week 2, So they got the Dolphins when the Dolphins were in full tank mode. They got the Jets with Luke Falk, I believe. They had a lot of benefits. And then the funniest thing, so they played the NFC East last season, which was terrible. They got the Redskins when they started Colt McCoy. Remember when that happened? There was Colt McCoy's one start in the last 3 years.
Right.
They caught them there. They got the Eagles in a game that was during when all the receivers were injured and the weather was bad. They caught the Cowboys, one of the best offenses in the entire NFL, in a monsoon. They had a ton of advantages last year, and they held one of the best offenses in the NFL a season ago, the Tennessee Titans, in the playoffs to 14 points. They did a tremendous job defensively. I don't care what people will talk about how great Derrick Henry was, but they held that offense to 14 offensive points, and they weren't good enough with Tom Brady to win.
Right.
And
remember, he threw the pick six at the end there. That's why
it got to 20.
21.
Yeah. So I just, it's hard. And again, this is a situation where people have gone broke betting against the Patriots for the last 20 years. So far be it from me to say, look, lay the minus 180 to bet them under 9.5. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that it can't, your reasoning for this division cannot be, well, it's the Patriots, right? You have to look at the underlying fundamentals and ask yourself, is this where the regime shift is? And I think yes has to be the answer. I think.
Yeah, if you want to bet them under 9, it's minus 130. And I could honestly see it moving even down to 8.5, because to me that's, again, one of the most obvious plays in this whole division. And I mean
130 is probably. 130 is a good minus 130 on under 9 is a good bet. I'm not saying, put the farm on it. I'm just saying it's one of those where don't bet the Patriots plus 135 to win the AFC East. Just because of the Patriots, you got to find
they've won it every year. Yeah.
You have to find a reason why that's a good bet. And I think there's a ton of reasons why it's a bad bet. And it offers a ton of opportunity because, people like us, I think we're a little bit lower. We have every team in that division projected for basically fewer than 8 wins. Buffalo is our favorite to win the division, but we are also lower on Buffalo than most. So if you want to fade the Bills, as you talked about earlier, the Dolphins are a good play, not only to win the division, but to make the playoffs. You're talking about a plus 400 play, which I wrote about the other day. The Jets are also one. If you think about, Adam Gase early on in Miami got some teams that weren't that good to win 10 or so games. He's in the second season with Darnold. Darnold's healthy. They actually, I think, had a decent first 3 rounds of the draft. But the play here, if you're going to fade Buffalo, is not New England. It's the rest of the division, because you get a far bigger payout, and you probably get an opportunity, should one of those teams get hot early, to sort of hedge bets later on in the season.
The New England Patriots are just fascinating, because my thought on it is they're never gonna tank. They're never gonna do things the way I think a conventional team or conventional wisdom would do things. So this may be their way of tanking. They're gonna say, look, we're gonna go out here and we're gonna put a team on the field that hinges on a quarterback. Now, it doesn't hinge on a quarterback being decent, which I thought was a really good point, right? Jarrett Stidham's going to have to be really good for this offense to be decent. And if he's not, they're going to be really bad. And that gives you an opportunity to pseudo-tank, to be bad enough to where your first-round pick, it's not in the 20s. You all of a sudden have a decently high pick. You can go get a quarterback. You can trade up. You can make some plays. Whereas if you're at 28, you just don't have that shot. And I think that's maybe why they haven't, attempted to go, not to mention the cap, but haven't attempted to go get another quarterback, is because when you know a lot about a quarterback, you don't have that opportunity to hit the high end of variance. Now, sure, you know nothing about Jarrett Stidham and there's no reason to believe he's going to be any good, but at least you don't know anything yet. and it gives you a chance to kind of tank. Whereas some other quarterbacks, like an Andy Dalton, he's going to be good enough to where your tank job isn't quite as bad.
Mm-hmm.
That's really the only way I can see this
I mean,
making sense.
But like all the narratives, like the thing about it is this is littered with narratives. The narrative is that, you know, Belichick is doing something that we don't think is optimal. What's the reason? You know, like, why is Sony Michel drafted in round 1? And it could just be, look, like he made a mistake, or he's not thinking optimally in this case, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
He really likes Jarrett Stidham.
He really likes Jarrett Stidham. And here's the thing, you know, oh man, he's going to want to beat Tom Brady this year. It's like, for what? Belichick has been one of the most successful coaches in NFL history, even if like he's not won before. He when in Cleveland, he had 3 or 4 losing seasons before he had a winning season. He won with Vinny Testaverde, you know, a playoff game even against Bill Parcells. He was the best defensive coordinator in league history before he was the Browns coach. Like, there's plenty on his resume to suggest that he doesn't need Tom Brady. The idea that he's going to try to like forego the future to win 9 or 10 games this season, I think is absurd. And people are like, well, he's super ultra competitive. Yeah, he wants to win the war. Winning the war is being a team that is capable of drafting Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence next season, while Tom Brady is on the last legs in Tampa Bay. This season means much more to Tom Brady than it does to Bill Belichick. So all of the narrative, because Tom Brady's shelf life is finite.
And that's the point.
Belichick's going to coach for a bunch of more seasons, and this one particular year, he's already shown he could win 11 games without Brady, right? He doesn't have, like, all these narratives about the Patriots I think are wrong. And look, they can win 9 or 10 games, and I can look like a fool, but I'm not betting on that, you know, just because people want it to be true.
Well, Brady made a choice that was so clearly win now that it almost makes sense for Belichick to be like, you know, I'm not going to try and play that game because I don't have the horses. It's still worth noting, like, they do have a very good defense. You know, I think if they were going, you know, full out tank, I mean, Stephon Gilmore is fantastic. He was very nearly the most valuable defensive player had it not been for Jamal Adams on the Jets last season. And, you know, that defense is still going to be really good, which makes me think that, you know, he believes, maybe erroneously so, in the ability for his defense to control things. That being said, in this division where you don't have, you know, this is not the NFC South, like, you know, maybe there is a chance. I don't know. I'm a little confused by the Patriots. I think we should move on, though. Let's talk about the Bills a little bit here. Do the Bills – so I was saying to myself, you know, the Bills actually have a pretty – you know, a pretty wide variance of outcomes here because of Josh Allen and because of Stefon Diggs. And how much could Stefon Diggs potentially help Josh Allen? You wrote about Josh Allen last week. Like, have you seen worlds? Is there a world that exists where Stefon Diggs makes Josh Allen a much better quarterback?
I think results-wise, certainly. I mean, last season we saw Kirk Cousins, who I think is a much better quarterback than Josh Allen, have success. But I don't think that success is anything people are rushing to the door to bet, you know. So could he catch more deep passes? Absolutely. Could he entice the Bills to throw the ball more deeply? Yes, which we've seen as a bad thing for them, given Allen's inaccuracy there. He will help this offense, I think, if everything else is equal. I think Allen, when you look at sort of, when people talk about the Bills offense, they were like, well, he scored this many touchdowns, he scored that many touchdowns. Well, he had 6 touchdowns on designed runs, which, you know, is probably not going to be something that repeats itself. He fumbled almost as many times as he scored a touchdown on designed runs. He was decent on scrambles, but we know that that's a little bit inconsistent year to year. And he was a negative expected value player when not throwing the ball, in case, you know, sacks, scrambles, all that kind of stuff. So is Stefon Diggs, and this is the bet the Bills are making, and the Bills are a very smart organization. The bet the Bills are making is, look, can Stefon Diggs curb the inevitable regression of Josh Allen in year 3? And I think the answer is maybe. But then you have to look at the rest of the roster and say, well, okay, but then if the Bills' defense regresses, then what happens? If Devin Singletary doesn't play as well, or the offensive line doesn't coalesce quite as well, then is it all a net? Is all a net negative? And that's why our models are saying, well, look, like the Bills' win total is 8.5. We're a little under that. We're still wait and see on the fundamentals of Josh Allen.
Yeah, I mean, looking at some of the advanced charting stuff for Josh Allen, and I mean the accuracy, we've talked about it. He had the highest rate of uncatchable throws in the NFL last season. And a place that, I think is a little concerning is what happened, when you're designing, when you're a smart organization, your thought is, okay, like we're going to get some first read throws that can be valuable. And last season, their EPA per play when he made a read, when he took his first read, was about a fourth of the NFL average. So can Stefon Diggs come in there, and they had receivers who were great, like number 2 guys. Can he be a guy that helps Josh Allen say, you know what, I have a lot more confidence going to my first read, and that guy's just going to be open more often, and that results in a lot more value on those design plays? Like, I think the answer could be yes. The tough thing is, it doesn't matter how open a guy is if you're going to be inaccurate, because ultimately, if you're inaccurate, even if the guy is able to go make a catch, you're still leaving a ton of value on the field. And that's something that Allen, just like, that's simply a place where he struggles. He has just been one of the most inaccurate quarterbacks throwing the ball downfield.
And it puts a ceiling on his completion percentage. If you're 26% of your passes are uncatchable and accurate, then if every other catchable ball is caught, then you're at Drew Brees level, right? Mm-hmm. Which is, good, but like any drops, right? And Diggs has had his drops in Minnesota. Obviously Brown has had his drops. Beasley is usually pretty sure-handed, but then you don't have great tight ends or receivers in terms of tight ends or backs in terms of pass catching. You just put a ceiling on your offense when you're as inaccurate as he can be, and that's troubling. And so he's going to have to be fundamentally more accurate. Last season, he led the league in percentage of dropbacks that earned a negatively graded designation by our analysts. So we just haven't seen that. The only time that we've seen a player emerge from that group and be good is Ryan Tannehill, and Tannehill switched offenses. He switched offensive coordinators. They had one of the cushiest situations for a quarterback. And the Bills already did that for Allen. It's not going to get a whole lot more cushy for Allen. So he's probably going to fall into that category where we're like, look, he just makes too many negative plays. And, Bills fans will talk to you about, well, he limited turnovers the second half of the season. And all of that's true. But he had 14 fumbles and only 4 were recovered by the other team. If that regresses to the league average, that's 3 more turnovers during the course of the year. It doesn't seem like much, but when you have to come from behind in victories against Cincinnati, against the Jets, against the Duck Hodges Steelers, those turnovers matter. And then when you have to play actually good teams, which I think the Jets will improve this year, the Dolphins will improve this year, then that's not going to be good enough to win, otherwise bad games that you play. So I don't know, man. I'm not rushing to bet the Bills to win the division. I think I got them a little bit at plus 160 earlier in the offseason before the Brady stuff. I think that's a good number. Plus 125 to me is just too short, and I just don't think you're going to be able to get value there.
Yeah, so we have the Bills at about 32% to win the division. Let me ask you this, though, because you mentioned – I think this is really interesting. You mentioned changing offenses. When Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson both came into the league, the question with each of them was, okay, they have deficiencies from an accuracy perspective. And Lamar Jackson was way more accurate using our ball location charting than Josh Allen was last year. Can they change the offense enough? Now, obviously, Josh Allen is not Lamar Jackson in a lot of ways, but he's pretty good carrying the football. Like, do you lean into that more? And do you say, okay, we now are going to play, we're going to create these open throws down the seams. We have Stefon Diggs who can get open. He's obviously, he's better than Marquise Brown, for example. I don't know if they have the same tight end talent, but like, do you kind of lean into that thing, change the offense significantly and say, look, this is what we're going to be going forward? Like, I wouldn't rule that out. If they're that smart of an organization, you would figure they've at least thought about something like that. I mean, they changed their offense significantly last year.
They did.
Josh Allen still threw the ball deep a lot, but like the year prior, it was an astronomically high number. I want to say it was like 24%. I'll pull it up here. He threw the ball 20-plus yards downfield. Where is it? I'm on the wrong quarterback. But, like that was something that they changed dramatically last year already. And I don't know why they wouldn't just say, maybe we can do it again. So it went from 20% to 15%. I think 20% led the league when he was a rookie.
The comparisons, though, from Allen's a good athlete. He runs the ball well. But the comparison between him and Lamar Jackson is just simply not there.
No, it's not. I'm not trying to compare him. I'm trying to say, could you do some things that are similar? Yeah. And really what you're doing is you're saying they ran the ball and designed runs. Now, you're not going to be – the difference is the ceiling is way lower, right? When you run a design run with Lamar Jackson, like the sky is the limit. When you're doing it with Josh Allen, you're living in a one-bedroom flat, kind of in the middle of nowhere, right? Like it's just it's a different thing.
It's the Buffalo Bills offense has to pay a mortgage because of Josh Allen, and the Baltimore Ravens offense has a paid-for house because of his ability to gain yards on early downs before contact. Allen had almost as many, it's like 100 yards less or whatever on designed runs, on scrambles than Lamar did. Like on designed passes, Jackson was the only one of, I believe, just one quarterback in the NFL who had positive EPA on dropbacks that did not result in a thrown pass. It was him. And then Allen was like third or fourth, but it was still negative. But they were both like effective on scrambles, on broken down plays. Allen had like 600 fewer yards on designed runs than Lamar Jackson. So he's got so much further to go because the offensive line isn't quite as good. He's not nearly as athletic. And that offense isn't, I think Dable is probably a fine offensive coordinator. He's not as good as Roman. So I just don't know if that's in the repertoire. But what the Bills do have that Baltimore simply doesn't have is a Stefon Diggs, a moneymaker at the receiver position that can sort of make plays all around the field, short, intermediate. But even then, like if we saw with the Minnesota Vikings in 2018, when Diggs is used predominantly on short passes, which is like what Buffalo tried to deploy a lot last year, the offense that Vikings offense was in the bottom 12 of the league in terms of yards per play, which is exactly where Buffalo was, right? So they're going to have to make a concerted effort to use play action, to use boot stuff, the Kubiak stuff that the Vikings used with Allen. And I just don't know, like Allen just doesn't have that downfield accuracy that Cousins has.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. Stefon Diggs last year, I want to say, was in the top 5 in yards off play action. They made a concerted effort to run a lot of play action, a lot of boot action to give what it does. And we say this all the time, like play action is all about time from a clean pocket. It increases that amount of time where the quarterback can still look downfield, and it gives your receiver more time to win. And the more time you have to cover, the harder chance you're going to have to be successful. So if they can leverage some of that, Stefon Diggs will get open. Now, you still have to put the ball in the money, but you have a little more room for error when a guy is wide open, as opposed to, John Brown with the guy in his hip pocket, or Cole Beasley with the guy in his hip pocket. So, like, that's worth thinking about. They also have, a really solid infrastructure of, the defense is very good. They've prioritized coverage, and they make a lot of smart decisions on, fourth downs and stuff like that. So there are some ways that they can win above what Josh Allen would get you on like an average NFL team,
they're pretty good in the kicking game. They're pretty good on the returns and stuff. They're, as you said, in the secondary, Hyde was their second most valuable player this season. Tre'Davious White's awesome. Poyer's good. They brought in, like, here's the stuff that I kind of like about them. So they brought in a guy like Josh Norman, who used to play for McDermott in Carolina. He was terrible in Washington for the majority of the time, but he could probably have some value. We've seen cornerback play yo-yo, and really situation is a key determiner there. So if he comes in and plays 70% of what he was in Carolina. That's a really good come up for their secondary. They did lose Kevin Johnson, who, is a player. But they did acquire, sort of Mario Addison, AJ Klein, Vernon Butler, Tyler Matakevich from, Temple. And then in the draft, I really do like what they did in the draft, despite not having a first-round pick. AJ Epineza would have been a first-round pick if the season was wiped out last year, right? He plays the season, he struggles, so then they get him as a sort of reduced rate. That's awesome. Zach Moss is a really good running back, and they didn't have to draft him in the second round like seemingly every other team thought they had to with the running back. And then Gabriel Davis out of UCF is very much like a down that, like, he reminds me of former Bears and Marcus Robinson, who is just like a downfield jump ball guy. And sometimes a quarterback with bad accuracy can use a guy like that just to kind of win a jump ball or two a game. So I think they did a really good job in free agency and the draft. It's the thing with Buffalo is, I think you and I are going to praise them forever for almost everything, and then Josh Allen's always going to be the question mark, the thing that holds them back.
All right, the New York Jets. So you mentioned how much you were surprised by them going 7-9. I bet that would be one of the most misconstrued or misforgotten records if you asked NFL fans, like, name how many wins did every team in the NFL have last year? And you'd get a lot of people that said the Jets had 4. But they also have Jamal Adams, at least currently, still on their team. And from what I've read, it seems like I really don't think they're actually going to get rid of him.
I'd be surprised if they traded him.
Yeah. Most valuable non-QB in the AFC East in terms of wins above replacement. And then Sam Darnold, who, like, I don't want to give the guy I never want to be the guy that's like, you know what, dude got mono, like, cut, totally unlucky, because, you got to deal with these things. But the fact of the matter is, you should never, you shouldn't overvalue what's happened last season, whether really good or really bad, because there's a lot of ways that those things can change ever so slightly, and all of a sudden a bad situation becomes a pretty decent situation. And look, the guy was still a top 3 pick, right? He was still a guy that was being considered going number 1
He was our
overall in
highest
that
graded
draft.
quarterback in the last 4 weeks of his rookie season.
Right. There's that too.
I mean, he's had bouts of being good. He beat Dallas last year. I mean, there's a lot. There's a decent amount. He's averaged 6.9 yards per pass attempt, which isn't great, but it's higher than Josh Allen the last few years in similar weather. With similar, and it hasn't exactly had great receivers. He hasn't exactly had great infrastructure around him. And then you look at what they did in the draft. Makai Becton is not great, but not the best prospect they could have gone with. But that's an offensive line player. They went with George Fant, Connor McGovern, Greg Van Roten in free agency. Like, none of those offensive linemen are great, but some subset of them might end up being okay, and better than what they've dealt with before. And then, they did lose Robbie Anderson, but you get Denzel Mims in the draft, a guy our friend Sam Monson likes a lot. Rashad Perriman, Jamison Crowder had a pretty good season last year. I'm not sitting here saying the Jets are going to be great, but in this division, they just don't have to be bad, and they can compete.
So here's some optimism for the Jets. They lose Robbie Anderson, sure, but Darnold was miserable from an accuracy standpoint, throwing 20-plus yards downfield. You get Denzel Mims. Maybe he's able to help you win in the intermediate a little bit more. In terms of percentage of throws that were deemed accurate, so that's either basically on the receiver's frame or in the perfect position, he was above average last year. He was in the top 10 in terms of perfect ball location throws. So, there are some things to really like. And I look again at first read stuff. The NFL average quarterback goes their first read about 70% of the time. Darnold was at 60%. So there was clearly a lack of offensive cohesiveness there, where he wasn't able to get the ball to where he was looking to go to. And as a result, his average time to throw above the league average. He was under pressure over 40% of the time. There's a lot of things that can regress back to league average that can help him a lot. Not to mention, was the New England game the worst game that any quarterback played last season? I mean, that was it's so funny. I'm looking at the quarterback annual right now. which, by the way, is a great thing to have in the offseason. If you're preparing for the regular season, you can get it with a PFF subscription. His New England game is like it breaks the page. You can't see it because it's so low.
Yeah.
So like you just take that game out, like that just doesn't happen again, and all of a sudden it's like a way better season.
Well, you look from week 9 on, and again, you can't do this, right? You can't always say like this is us ripping on Buffalo Bills, which,
right.
Fans, right? But you look from week 9 on, they won what? They went 6-2, right, as a team. And Darnold was the 13th highest graded quarterback during that stretch. Mm-hmm. He graded higher from week 9 to week 17 than Baker Mayfield, than Jared Goff, than Aaron Rodgers, than Tom Brady, than Deshaun Watson, than Dak Prescott, than Gardner Minshew, than Jameis Winston, Rivers, Josh Allen, Carson Wentz. Like, from the, and he didn't, there are guys ahead of him that are a little surprising, namely Dwayne Haskins, Mitch Trubisky, so the splits matter a little bit. And Darnold in the literally half a season, so the second half of the season, graded as an above average quarterback. If he does that, if he's the 13th highest graded quarterback in 2020, what's the probability that the Jets win the division?
Okay, now counterpoint. So I think it's a decent percentage, but counterpoint to that is it's always easy to perform well when like no one cares anymore.
Sure, 100%.
Like and that's the thing. You mentioned the 2 times that you've mentioned he's played well. Last 4 games of his rookie season, last 8 games of last year, it didn't matter at that point, right? Like it just didn't. And it's always easier to perform in those situations. That being said, I'm not sure they've ever gone into a season in week 1 and been like, we have a shot. Like obviously the mono thing last year, they were terrible the year before. So like this is probably the first year where you go into week 1. Now, who knows? Because like week 1 this year, although it's being reported that coaches might be in the facilities in a week or so, and they still think fans are going to be at the game. So, and I have an idea on that in a second. But like this is a markedly better start so far than what they've had the past 2 seasons, and that gives you some hope there for Sam Darnold. I'll also mention like the Makai Becton pick. You talk about types of prospects. The reason we don't like that pick there is because you just don't know. He did not have a lot of true pass sets. He had very few pass sets that are going to look like what he's going to have in the NFL. So while you say, yeah, this guy's as physically a freak as we've seen, you still haven't seen him do what he's going to be asked to do. And so he could be great, but he could be a disaster. And that's why it's a questionable pick in the first round. You have Denzel Mims and Ashton Davis, who I thought were much stronger in terms of what you'd project to get from them. So you could, if Makai Becton ends up being that guy that actually can do it and just wasn't given the chance, where you go, oh, this is a team that could win the division. And that's why if I look at this, and I'll ask you this here in a second, this division is as close from top to bottom as I think you have out there. And if I'm going to place a bet, and I have already, it's going to be on the Dolphins and the Jets at plus 800 instead of either of the 2 favorites.
100%. And hopefully you got some on Buffalo when they were not the favorite, when they were, significantly lower. And that way you're basically just fading New England. But currently the only bets you can make are those for, the two underdogs. And if you don't want to bet them to win a division, you can bet them to make the playoffs. And in a 17 format, I think that there's a lot. I don't think that that's necessarily as baked in to the numbers. There's some opportunity here that I don't think will be available in subsequent years.
All right. Real quick, who's the most valuable player in this division when we're talking about this next year?
Tua Tagovailoa.
I like it. That's who I was going to say too. But I might go with Ryan Fitzpatrick running it back.
The most important player in this division is Sam Darnold. The most valuable player. If Sam Darnold turns out to perform like Matt Ryan or something, like a 3rd round pick, right, or 3rd overall pick, the division changes overnight. But
I like that.
I don't see it happening. I don't see it happening very often. But he's the most important one. But the bet on who will be the most valuable is going to be Tua because of the unknown.
I'm going to go with you. I agree with you there. Actually, I like that a lot. Okay, let's get to the match here. Real quick, though, my thought on the league saying they're still going to have fans coming to games is their tact has been so far, we're not going to say something isn't that we're planning on having happen. I can't speak. We're not going to change something that we have planned until we absolutely have to, because the second we start backing off, this avalanche starts occurring of everything gets postponed and nothing can remain in place. So while it's concerning in the sense that I can't see a way in which fans are playing or fans are at the games while players are playing, it does give me some hope that this at least strategy has worked so far.
Yeah. I think you and I are both on the record saying that we think the most likely outcome is that the season plays on time, but without fans. I still am of that belief. But it's interesting that the public, I think the public might be far more open to the idea of an increased risk than maybe you and I anticipated. Mm-hmm. And I think the NFL is taking cues from that. And if that means that there are fans in the stands and that's good for the league, it might not be the best public health situation, but I remain open to be swayed there. But I think ultimately, after the league takes stock of what happens this summer with the NBA, the NHL, and MLB, WNBA, things like that, they'll probably. I still am firmly on the side of no fans as the most likely outcome, but I think I've changed my prior a little bit.
Are you pro pumped in fan noise?
No, I like the idea of having like virtual fans and having sort of like two screens on the bottom. I don't like the pumped in fan noise because I don't know, it just feels weird.
Here's something that I was thinking about. If they don't have pumped in fan noise and you can hear players, do they get so scared about cursing that they put a delay on? And if they put a delay on, can you not bet live?
I don't think you can bet live to begin with anyway, right? Because the delay is already too substantial. Like if I'm live betting a game, I don't bet until there are commercials or I'm at the game. Like the lag is too substantial. It's worse for sports like basketball and soccer that are more free flowing. In the NFL, it's still not great. But you're right. I think the delay is trivial. I mean, most people are streaming anyway, and they're already 20-ish seconds behind. So I could see them putting a delay in. I think it'd be really fun to hear how people talk. We saw it a little bit in the XFL, with being able to hear the coach talk to the quarterback. I think those types of things, even though it would put question into the competitive advantage, I think that would be pretty entertaining. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity for the league this year to do a pretty good job of giving us a product that's unique and unprecedented.
Yeah, I'm for hearing the players. I just don't know if coaches want you to, right? Yep. Like I think coaches like to feel as though what they say to their players is between them and their players, and I don't think they're going to want you to be able to hear it. So as much as I'd love it, I have a hard time seeing that much unfettered access happen. All right, the match. Let me tell you what I did. As I said last week, I was going to bet on Phil and Brady because they were huge underdogs. And the point is you just have no idea what's going to happen in this situation. So take the underdog. So I did. I then watched Phil Mickelson's Instagram video about, I don't know, was it 3 hours before the match happened? Fell in love with it. It was the type of just ridiculous confidence and arrogance, and it made no sense. So I bet some more. And then when I saw that it was going to be raining, I was like, oh, this is going to be a total disaster. Peyton is going to, hurt himself or something. His stiff neck's going to really stiffen up. Brady's going to be pliable. I bet more. So I was very much on Nicholson and Brady.
All the chips into the middle of the
table. I was all in, and I was so excited, man. I was sitting here. I put my computer away. I refused to look at Slack, basically, unless it was you talking about how disgusting Tom Brady was playing, and I was trying to just enjoy it. Here was my big takeaway. This was really, really fun. It was a blast to watch, and it was proof that watching athletes do anything is really exciting, and the gap between pros at any sport and even really good athletes trying to play that sport is insane. Like, Tom Brady was a disaster out there. Peyton Manning was really good, But like I don't think we really got a sense of that because of how much better Phil Mickelson and Tiger Woods were. I mean, they're ridiculous at golf. That was my big takeaway.
Yeah, and still not good enough. And even like you'll tell me to bite my tongue, but even like a washed up Tiger,
Stop it.
And sort of like a kind of washed up Phil are like so much better than they are. That dude, it's sort of
it was casual. Tiger was hitting every fairway. He was not. Tiger's known as a grinder. Tiger wasn't grinding at all. The dude was just like he could have. It was like Jordan shooting free throws with his eyes closed, and I'm sure how Brady and Manning could run an offense with like a hand tied behind their back. Like he was not grinding at all and was just flushing it down the middle every time. The way Phil was basically helping Tom Brady do anything decent was incredible. And they still had a chance. That was the incredible thing. If Tom Brady hadn't missed a couple of short putts, now I know he made the eagle putt that got him closer, but like they legitimately had some chances to get that to extra holes. I lost the bet
by one stroke, right?
They were up by one. Yeah, it was match play. So they were up by one hole going into like the last three, and they had a couple of chances. Honestly, Peyton Manning. So it was the par three. I want to say it was the 16th, and Brady sticks it close. Mickelson, I think, sticks it close, and Manning out of he and Woods got within like 3 feet. Woods hit it to like 20 feet. So if Manning doesn't make that huge par three shot, and he was good on all of the par threes, there's a joke in there about Manning not being able to throw anything downfield, but just being accurate in the short round. Like if it hadn't been for Peyton Manning, that's probably going to extra holes.
Yeah,
I thought it was fantastic.
I made one bet. It was at plus 165. It was a day before, and that bet lost. And I don't know if it's because they improved, they made it into a match late. I don't feel bad about it at all.
No, I do not regret it for a second. If you had to pick, so I'm not sure if you could pick two other golfers. I think Phil and Tiger are the best two. If you had to pick two other NFL players, or actually just two other athletes right now, who would you put with them?
I think people would be remarkably surprised at how good Steph Curry would do.
Oh, he'd be amazing. He's actually good. What about Curry and
also
Romo?
just as a person, like I feel like Curry has this stigma of being like too nice and too. But I bet you he's a competitor out there.
If you put Curry and Romo, both of whom are legit golfers, that could be interesting.
Yeah. So I think Curry is one of them, and I don't know. I mean, Curry is a basketball player. So what if you put like Curry and like Mike Trout?
Mike Trout would be interesting. Have you seen the video of him hitting at Topgolf?
Yeah. Dude, I mean, you probably could hit 300-yard bombs like relatively frequently. Probably,
with ease.
Yeah. So, football is obviously the most popular sport in the U.S. and all that kind of stuff. And so, Manning and Brady was a great get. Michael's obviously a clear choice, but like if you do like active athletes, I think Curry and like Trout would be a good one.
That is a good one. Yeah, I think Michael Jordan is the missed. If you could get Michael Jordan on there, I think you'd have the entire world watching because you'd just be like, this guy's a degenerate gambler. This is going to be incredible. Just loves to compete. I think Tony Romo would be fascinating on there. I think Larry Fitzgerald would be kind of cool. And Aaron Rodgers was another guy. Like, God. I think Aaron Rodgers.
I feel like that'd be so cringeworthy, right? Because Rodgers is such kind of a.
Yeah, but I kind of want to see that. I thought those guys did a really good job of being normal dudes, and I kind of want to see some players who might not be as normal. I really want to see it. Gotcha. Manning and Brady clearly had too much respect for one another. Like,
and they have too much self-awareness.
Yes, they were. Brady not melting down was incredible. What would I be doing if I was hitting it like Tom Brady?
I've seen you throw a basketball into the rafters after losing to me.
Wouldn't be good. Oh man,
Rodgers would cuss out the beer cart gal for for getting him like a dogfish head instead of a fat tire. That's Rodgers.
I don't know about that. I think Rodgers would have some kind of pre-planned jokes that he'd be throwing out.
Yeah, it would just be cringeworthy, I feel like.
I'd love to see it. Okay, we're going to get out of here on this. We are giving away an Edge subscription to or some PFF swag to 5-star reviews that ask us a good question. Now, we're running out of time, so I'm not going to read this question. But at Cole Blau, don't know if he's related to David Blau. No idea. At Cole Blau 6 had a really good question that I'll just leave for everyone to think about. If you had $100 to spend in a blind auction with all 31 other GMs, how much would you be willing to invest at quarterback, wide receiver, on down the list? That's a really good question. And he also threw in a bonus recipe, which is to check out Alton Brown's smoked meatloaf. It has barbecue. It says beef, pork, barbecue chips, chilies, and more, which actually doesn't sound terrible. And I hate meatloaf. But hopefully if you guys are out there and you're looking for something to cook, maybe this is something you can make happen. So Alton Brown's smoked meatloaf is his thought. Real quick, how much are you spending out of 100 on a quarterback?
30.
Okay. I think I could be tempted to get closer to 40, 50. If I can get Mahomes, it might be hard for me to not risk it all.
I would. It depends upon the quarterback, but yeah, 30.
Yeah. That's a very interesting question. By the way, leave us a 5-star review, ask us a question, send us a take, a recipe, whatever it is, and we'll read it here and throw you a free sub. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We appreciate it. Stay safe. Peace out.